Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. It is the second session of our Set Aside series, Practical Strategies for Strengthening Title I Supports for Students Experiencing Homelessness. We are so happy to have you with us today. Again, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time, and we hope that this will be something that will really help with you thinking about Title I and how to best support the students that you work with. So just a couple of notes as we jump into our time together. This webinar will last 45 minutes today. If you've got questions as we go through, we want to hear from you. We want your questions, but please type those into the Q&A box. So as you're joining, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, we love to know who's here, but please type any questions that you have into the Q&A box. Sometimes the chat gets going and the questions get lost in the chat. So if you can help us keep those separate, we'll make sure that we have time to answer the questions that you have. We are recording our session today, so if you are hoping to catch up with this again after we're done, you'll have access to the recording as well as the slides, and you'll also receive a certificate for attendance. So if you don't receive it right away, hang tight. It takes a little bit to get all of those sent out, but you will get that in your email. And then one quick note, if you are not connected with us already in our Schoolhouse Connection Slack community, I want to invite you to do that. It is a really excellent place to connect with your colleagues who are working with McKinney-Vento across the country. Just this week, we had some conversation going about a situation in that Slack channel. So it's a really great place to connect with others, to talk about the questions that you have, to learn some strategies and things like that. So I want to encourage you to sign up for that if you have not already done that. And if you are not familiar with us at Schoolhouse Connection, I'll take just a minute to introduce you to us. We are a national nonprofit advocacy organization, and our mission is to overcome homelessness from prenatal to post-secondary. And we do that in a number of different ways by providing practical assistance and professional development. If I have not had the opportunity to meet you, my name is Karen Rice. I'm the Senior Manager of Education Initiatives, and I have the pleasure of working on our K-12 team. So we do that with our early care through higher education and K-12. We also do federal and state policy advocacy. And if you're not familiar with our scholarship program, I want to encourage you to check out our website. Our scholarship application is open. So if you have students who are current juniors who are or have experienced homelessness, please check that out. We would love to have as many applications as possible from the students that you are working with. So that is us at Schoolhouse Connection. So let me just talk to you a little bit about what our plan is for today. So we are going to do a very brief, very fast and furious overview of the Title I Part A Homeless Set Aside. If this is new to you, I want to encourage you to go back and watch a webinar that we did in December that has a lot of really complete information. This is going to be just a very high level overview of that today. So if you're looking for more information, that is on our website. We're going to talk a little bit, we introduced this in our first session of the Set Aside series on the idea of using an elevator pitch to talk about funding and to help advocate for funding. And then today we have the pleasure of having with us Brian Coleman from Oklahoma City Public Schools. So Brian is going to share with us about the homeless set aside in Oklahoma City Public Schools, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So that is our agenda today. So as we are jumping in, let's start by talking about the Title I Part A homeless set aside. Well, this again will be very fast and furious, very high level. So hang with us. And I do want to say, as we're talking about this, if you have specific questions about allowable uses of these funds, we are going to talk briefly about that, but we would love to connect with you offline or also to have a conversation with you to help connect you to your state coordinator to talk more about what your state requires. So allowable use questions, we probably won't get into those too much today, but I wanted to just kind of put that out there that if you've got those specific questions, we're happy to connect with you after. Okay, so what are Title I Part A funds? Title I Part A funds are federal funds that come from the government, the federal government, through state education agencies, and then are given out in allocations to LEAs across the country. And it's important to know that McKinney-Vento students who are attending any school in the LEA are automatically eligible for these Title I Part A services. And it's important to know this because not all schools have Title I Part A funding, but our students experiencing homelessness do have access to those services, even if that school does not receive Title I Part A funding. So all LEAs that receive Title I Part A funds must set aside an amount that's reasonable and necessary to provide our students experiencing homelessness with comparable services. So today we're going to talk about what that set aside looks like. We're going to talk about what that looks like very practically in Oklahoma City. And then hopefully that'll give you some ideas of how you can be using those funds and thinking about what that might look like in your own LEA. So again, all LEAs are required to set aside funds. If you receive a Title I Part A allocation, you are required to reserve a portion of those funds to specifically support our students experiencing homelessness. And again, students who are experiencing homelessness are categorically eligible for those services, regardless of what school they attend. So that's a question that we get often of the student is attending in a non-Title I school. How does that look like? What do we do with that? And I want to say that those students are eligible for those services, even if that is not a Title I school. And we know that so many LEAs, 76% of LEAs do not receive the McKinney-Vento subgrant funds or the Education for Homeless Children and Youth subgrant funds. Those are the subgrants that come from specifically for McKinney-Vento programs. And so they really rely on those Title I Part A funds to meet needs. If you don't have access to those subgrant funds, the Title I Part A homeless set aside is the very best way to meet some of those needs to support your students experiencing homelessness. So that's why we are spending our time talking about this, because we really want to encourage you to be taking a look at the amount of funds that you have, how those funds are used, looking at the needs of your students, and then helping to determine what the best way is to use those funds to meet student needs. All right, so how can we use our set aside funds to support our students experiencing homelessness? Well, first and foremost, I want to say that the guidance from the Department of Education is that services must be reasonable and necessary to make sure that our students experiencing homelessness can take advantage of educational opportunities. The Department of Education also says that these funds must be used as a last resort when other funding sources aren't available. So this is really an opportunity to look at what funding sources that you have in your LEA. If you receive those McKinney-Vento subgrant funds, if you have other federal funds, we have talked a lot over the years about what that looks like to really blend and braid funding sources together. And then you have your Title I Part A set aside funds. And so when you've looked at your other funding sources, those Title I Part A set aside funds can really step in and fill the needs that our students have that we can't use or we don't have other funding sources to support. So what do those allowable uses look like? Well, we know that transportation is a huge need across the country. And so our Title I Part A homeless set aside funds can be used for the cost of transportation to and from the school of origin. Many LEAs choose to use their set aside funds for the salary of the liaison and really to build the capacity of that liaison to do the work of implementing McKinney-Vento. There are also a lot of other allowable uses that we have available to us. Again, we don't have time to go in depth on all of these allowable uses today. So if you've got questions, please contact us after this webinar. And if we have specific state questions, we will be happy to connect you with your state coordinator to get more information. But really what I want to say about these allowable uses is there is a lot of room for creativity in what's listed here. And so when we think about the best way to meet needs and what it looks like, we can really be creative with these allowable uses and really dig in to find out what are those needs that our students have? How do we really meet those needs and what can we do and how can we use these funds to support those? So we have, and we have shared this in the past, different needs assessments that LEAs are using and that different states are providing. So if you're looking for resources, we have a really great toolkit. And I will go to the next slide so you can see what this looks like. But we have put this toolkit together for you that includes some of those templates if you're looking for things like, how do I know what student needs are? Or how do I look at my data? How do I kind of do all of these things to help determine the best way to use my funds? So please take a look at that toolkit. It's a really excellent resource and available for you to use. So a couple of common questions that I just want to walk through for a minute before I introduce you to our guest today. One of the common questions that we get is how much of these set aside funds are required for us to reserve? The tricky thing about this is that the federal law does not give you a specific number. There's not a specific percentage. There's not a specific dollar amount. There's really no guidance that says it has to be this exact amount or this exact calculation for this. Instead, we go back to that amount that is necessary to provide those services. So some places that might look like a percentage of your overall Title I allocation. It might look like a per pupil amount. It might look like another amount that you've determined that's important to meet the student needs that you have, but there's not that guidance. And so again, if you are not already connected with your state coordinator, I want to continue to put in a plug for that because states do have a lot of information on how to really calculate that amount. And I want to say a lot of that you can find in this toolkit. So please take a look at the different information in this toolkit. Another common question that we get is, can we adjust the set aside amount during the year? So what if we determine an amount and we have other needs that come up? Can we make adjustments to that amount if we have more needs or if things come up during the school year? In many cases, that might be a natural disaster that causes more students to lose their housing and to be identified under McKinney-Vento. And the answer is yes. So you can adjust that amount as your needs change or as they increase. And I want to just put in a plug here for connecting with those in your LEA who are in your business office or your fiscal services office or your federal programs office, whoever's kind of responsible for overseeing this, and have some conversations about maybe how you're going to reevaluate your needs at different points during the school year, how you're going to go back and look at what the needs are, how you're spending your funds, and then make those adjustments as needed. So you as the liaison likely are not the one doing all of that kind of budgetary piece. I know many liaisons are not. And so I just want to encourage you to make sure that you are connecting with those folks in your LEA that really have the ability to go in and to make those changes and make those updates, and that you can talk with them about what's happening in your program. All right, I mentioned that we've got a lot of state guidance that's included in our toolkit, so I wanted to highlight that very quickly. And then I also wanted to say that our toolkit includes a number of local spotlights. So please take a look at these. We've had some great conversations with LEAs across the country on how funds are being used, really what that looks like, what resources they have. Many of these local spotlights include links to needs assessments or to other documents that might be helpful for you as you're looking at how to maybe think differently about your Title I homeless set-aside funds. So please take a look at that. You might have also seen that we are trying to publish new spotlights all the time. We want to get that information to you so that you can really be looking at those examples and thinking about, oh, what might I be able to replicate? Or this is something that I hadn't thought of. How can I learn from this? And really to be thinking about how those funds are used to support students. So these spotlights in here are really great, and I want to just encourage you to take a look at those. All right, very quickly, I want to talk about this idea of using an elevator pitch. If you are not familiar with the idea of an elevator pitch is essentially a really short, concise way to talk about something. And so we created an elevator pitch, I think it was last year actually, that really looked at building awareness and identification of McKinney-Vento. And as we've been thinking about Title I set-aside funds, it occurred to us that we really need to think about, what does that elevator pitch look like when we're talking about funding and when we're really looking at those funding sources? So we wanted to offer this to you as an example of how you could craft a 30 to 90 second elevator pitch, a short, concise, something that you can use to convey information about the needs of your program and about the funds that will support those needs of your program. And so we know, and I've said this before, I'll say it probably many more times, that you all as liaisons cannot do your jobs alone. And so having those connections in your business office, in your fiscal services, with your federal programs office, those are so important to be thinking about how to really talk about Title I set-aside funds. So this is just very briefly kind of how we thought about how to structure your elevator pitch. So if you're thinking about, I've never connected with my federal programs director, or I've never connected with my business office, how can I use this idea of an elevator pitch to talk about what homelessness looks like in our school community and why we need these funds to support the needs of our students? So I want to offer this to you just as an example. So thinking about how you can lead with data, sharing about the numbers of students that you have identified or what the trends have been over time. You might want to talk about, in this example, looking at the absentee information and data of your students who are identified as experiencing homelessness. It's important that we let folks know that we are required by federal law, the McKinney-Vento Act, to remove barriers for our students. And so looking at that data and tying that back to the requirement of what we're able to do, or I'm sorry, of what we're required to do. We also need to make it make sense to our audience. So we need to say, this is what we're looking at with our set aside funds. Maybe we use these funds in this example with chronic absenteeism to increase our staff capacity to address absenteeism and to increase our staff capacity to remove those barriers. And then offer follow-up and figure out that next step and that really concrete thing that you can do in that advocacy. And so I want to just say that I know that this idea of an elevator pitch to talk about funding, it really implies a number of things. It's rarely this simple to say, hey, we have this need, I'll put together this proposal. So we know that this assumes that your business office maybe already knows about McKinney-Vento. Maybe you're already having conversations. Maybe you're already talking about set aside funds. In this example, maybe chronic absenteeism is already a priority in your LEA and it's already something that you're looking at. So know that we know that this is a very sort of simplistic resource and tool for you, but we hope that it will get you thinking about how you can change this and modify this to make it meaningful for the conversations that you need to have. So it's a tool and a resource, and we want to encourage you to think about how you can change that and update it to make it really work for you if it's something that would be beneficial. So with that, that was a lot of information. Thanks so much for hanging tight through our very fast overview of our Title I set aside. But I am very happy now that we are going to shift gears just a little bit from me talking. And I am going to introduce you to our panelists today. So today we have the pleasure of talking with Brian Coleman, who is the Homeless Education Administrator in Oklahoma City Public Schools. So Brian, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I want to just ask if you don't mind introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your role. That would be a great place to start.
Yes, I'm Brian Coleman. I'm with Oklahoma City Public Schools. I oversee our homeless department as well as our foster care department. I've been with Oklahoma City Public Schools for 15 years now. Have been working in the homeless department out of the 15. I think it's been, then I lost count, 12, 13 years in that role. My colleague actually just popped in. That's Jennifer right there. She is our homeless elementary coordinator as well. So she's just listening in. And so my role is we're the liaisons for the district. We are the second largest district in Oklahoma City. The first largest district will be Tulsa. Then we'll be the second largest district. And our role as any liaison is to make sure we're breaking barriers for our homeless students and trying to give them support that they need to make sure that they get the education like a regular ed student does.
Much, Brian. I would love if you would tell us how much does your LEA set aside in the Title I homeless reservation, and then talk us through a little bit about what that process looks like to determine that amount.
So the LEA amount, it varies each year. This really depends on what the state have set up for us. We had it where it was 180,000, where we were able to use those funds on our students. Each year, it's not the same exact amount. It just all depends on the funding from the state. As we know, as liaisons, those numbers can actually fluctuate when it comes to allocations from the state. And then you said talk about the funding and how we use it.
Yeah, if you want to jump in and talking about what the funds are used for, I think this
So,
is kind of the meat of our conversation and what people are probably most curious about.
so when you look at what we're using our funding for here in Oklahoma City Public Schools, the number one thing is, of course, we use it for our salaries to make sure that we're paying salaries. And beyond salaries, we focus on the students. And what I mean based off of that is the school supplies, uniform, hygiene products. We try to make sure that we're covering those bases where we're breaking those barriers for students. The other things that we use our funding for is the last couple of years, what we have been doing, because something we have started looking outside of the box of beyond just the backpack and the school supplies. What are we doing for students when they're out of school on break, or sitting at home. So you're looking at winter break, you're looking at summer break, all those things. So what we have started doing is we have started linking with um, partners, like Lakeshore or people like that, where we're actually doing summer learning kits to the kids, where we're sending that out, where they're still getting an education while they're sitting at home. So we try to do a summer and winter kit to all the students. We really focus on our elementary because we know that as soon as those kids get into fourth grade, they have to do that reading test and writing test. So we're really trying to make sure that we're able to uh, get them ahead of the ball. So we do use funds for that. The other thing that we use funding for is if we have families or students who are part of the homeless program and vision is a issue. One of the things that we have here is we connected with an agency called Vision. So if there's students who need eyeglasses and they do not have the actual insurance to pay for it, then they can submit a referral. We'll submit the referral over to the eye doctor, and then they will verify if the student have insurance or not, and whatever that remaining cost is, we'll be able to pick that up. We do tell the parents that we know that contacts is a big thing, but we can't pay for contacts, so it's literally just the glasses. Um, the other things that we look at, use our funding for, is we work with another partner, another agency that's called Pivot. And Pivot works with a lot of our unaccompanied youth that's out here that's on their own. And what they actually do is we'll do a referral with Pivot. We've been partners with Pivot for years. And so it's a lot more support that they're able to give our students. So once we do the referral, the kids have the option to say, yes, they want to be a part of the program, or no, they do not want to be a part of the program. They don't have to be just unaccompanied youth. They could be just homeless students that just need a little bit support. So we partner up with this agency. We've been partners with them. We have a contract in place where once they are connected with Pivot, they will also give them additional wraparound services. So they do counseling. They also help them start for the higher education. So they take these kids to college tours where they're able to go see college campuses, show them how to fill out SNAP benefits. It's just so many things that this agency actually does when it comes to our students. Where we also use our funds to pay for students' graduation fees. This agency, if those kids are set up for Pivot also have the funding where they can take care of graduation fees for those students. We can't use our funding for prom, but Pivot can also make sure that those kids are able to attend prom. So we also another big thing that each liaison definitely deals with is transportation. And so we looked at some additional things on what we can do when it comes to transportation with the Title I set aside, because we know that gift cards and all that is not an allowable expense. But one thing that we did notice is that um, our district have really been pushing for pre-K to be enrolled. So we know it's not a requirement, but we have really been pushing. And one thing about our district is pre-K is still a liability. They're supposed to be in booster seats, so they are not able to get on our buses. So what do we do now? So we looked at different options on what we can do. We partnered up last year with the agency called Hop Skip Drive. And what this agency would do is just almost like they remind you pretty much of Lyft or Uber, but they work with McKinney-Vento students. So and they will actually, once we put these students in or where they stay at, they will go pick these families up, get them back and forth to school with no problem. So now it's not just a burden on a family saying, well, do I really have to put my pre-K student in school because I don't have the transportation? Now we're breaking that barrier where we can say, well, not just your kindergarten in all the way up to 12th grade, let's bring your pre-K in. And then if you have students that's a little bit further out of their school of origin because they have relocated. Buses, yeah, we still use our buses. but we also look at the safety on how long the student is going to be on a bus. So in that distance. So if we see so it's going to be a long distance because how far out they are, then this will be another way that we'll be able to transport our students. So we use our set aside for many things, trying to make sure that we're able to break a lot of the barriers of these children.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm glad that you mentioned that about pre-K transportation. That was on my list to make sure that we talked about. One thing I want to just ask if you can provide a little bit more information on. You and I had the opportunity to talk about this, but if you can share what that contract looks like with Pivot and exactly kind of how that works with your set aside funds. And you said they have their own funding sources as well. So can you talk a little bit about kind of what that looks like, what you're paying for with that partnership?
So when it comes to Pivot and what that contract look like, it is strictly just for Oklahoma City Public School students. That's a part of the program. So if students, once they go through the intake process, they will tell when they talk to that person from Pivot, they will do an intake with them, tell them exactly what their needs and wants are. If it's and so when we do the contract, we do one each year with Pivot because we have to start. It's a start and end date because we can't do cross physical school year. So with that being said, they provide every service that those children are needing. So I mean, from they even offer tutoring at their sessions and all that. It's just so much that agency actually does that benefits these kids to be able to uh, go a little bit more on based off of what we can actually do. Because when we're the liaisons are dealing with so many students at once, if you have these students as a part of Pivot that's giving that additional one-on-one counseling, the mentorship that they all provide, then it's a big step. But ours is strictly just for OKCPS students. Is the funding that we're using for because it's a lot of different students that districts that feed into Pivot also.
And please feel free to jump in on this, but one of the points that I wanted to also add about that partnership is that when we had spoken, you had mentioned that they send you an itemized list of the services that they're providing so that you have access to know exactly what services and supports that your students are receiving. So I wanted to make sure to mention that because I know sometimes we get questions about like, well, what does that really look like, and how do you know what services are happening and things? So um,
That's a big requirement, definitely a big requirement for our accounts payable because they, in order for them to bill it, they have to see it broken down, itemized breakdown. Um, just like our graduation fees that when it comes to our students, our seniors that's graduating, it have to be something itemized where it's showing exactly what we are paying for because we're paying for things that's outside of what federal funds says that we can pay for it, then that would be a big issue. So we definitely ask for something itemized, broken down, saying that this is what we're using these funds for.
Thanks, Brian. Can you talk about what impacts you've seen from your use of funds? You've talked a lot about breaking down barriers, but if there's anything more you want to add about really what kind of impacts you've seen with your program and your students.
I have seen for the years that I've been working with homeless, I have definitely seen major impacts when it comes to our students. The number one impact that I've definitely have seen just between this year and last year, when we were able to start providing additional transportation for families, uh, it allowed it the impact that we saw more of is we're not looking at the absentee being so out of control now because now we're seeing what the barriers are. And if a family is not going to start, a student is not going to school because transportation needs, and if we have the additional transportation where we can go get these kids, then that right there is making a big impact on where we're able to get kids to school where they're not just sitting home or being dropped for truancy. So that's a major impact that we definitely see. The other impacts that we see, and this is what I share with you when we first talked. when a student comes, we have a clothing closet just for our homeless students, where we use our funds. We have this, it almost looked like a little mini Walmart or Burlington sitting inside our office. And when the families come to the building and when we find out what their needs are, and it may be uniforms, it may be hygiene products or tennis shoes or whatever the case may be. But when they see that the liaisons have this program and they have these funds to actually break barriers. And then when you're able just to give a little something, and it doesn't even matter if this is a pencil or a piece or a crayon or just a backpack, when you see how a family lights up just because they thought that that was going to be a major issue trying to get these kids started, but now we broke one of the barriers that they were facing because we all know that you look at school supplies, they are very expensive. When you look at when you start looking at those who have to wear uniforms, it can get real cost effective, So uh those are major barriers that we are definitely seeing where we're able to break some of the costs from the parents where it's not going to be, well, I don't want my child to look different than everyone else inside the school. Now they're all looking the same, where it's not going to be, well, this is the homeless kid out here. Uh, Now is, well, this is just a student inside the schools. And then the other impact is that we're definitely seeing is, when we're doing the cross training with the schools and they're doing more identifying while we're doing more identifying. So now we know that these funds are being used because we're working with additional students, additional families, where we're breaking the barriers for homelessness.
I wonder if you would also be willing to talk about what other funding sources are you we've talked a lot about braiding and blending funds and kind of what other funding sources we can use to support your support McKinney-Vento programs. So I wonder if you could talk about, are there other funding sources that you bring in to help with things that Title I set aside funds can't be used for?
So other fundings that, as you mentioned in the beginning, a lot of this other districts don't have McKinney-Vento funding. We do know that that is a grant that, it's a competitive grant. Uh, Now we're able to have that additional funding. So what we may not be able to do with Title I, we may be able to do with McKinney-Vento. When it comes to other needs that we know that the state would not allow us to use our expenses for, we do have an activity fund, and this activity fund is where we do our own fundraisers, work with restaurants, try to get funding from them, other outside community. When they hear about our program and they hear the need of our homeless students, then you have those out in the community that will pour into our program. So this food is one of the things that we really can't use much of our funds for, but when it comes to families, we can use that funding with our activity fund where we can actually do a little bit more for families. We have kids that are sleeping on the floor. We use our activity fund where we can get them off the floor, and we'll use our activity fund to go get them blow up mattresses, since we do know that set aside we can't use that funds for. So it's a lot of things that we still try to, outside of the Title I and McKinney-Vento, we still look at what additional barriers can we still break, even working and connecting with outside partners where they can pour into the program, where we can keep on pouring into our families.
Thank you so much for that, Brian. I have one more question, and then there are a couple questions from participants. So I will give you those as well. But the last question that I have is, can you talk about what kind of training you might have done with your business office to really help your business? So you're having conversations about funding. What kind of awareness building have you built with your business office around McKinney-Vento?
Ask that question one more time.
Sure. What kind of training have you done with your business office or your fiscal services, federal programs, kind of the people in charge of the finances, to really build awareness about the needs of your students and your program?
So the trainings that we have, we're connected with in to federal programs. So one of the things that the trainings that we have received, that I have received, our department has received as a whole is um, it goes back to that point to that part of what are we doing to actually break barriers beyond just backpack in school supplies or uniforms? Or are we looking at additional support where it comes to academic success, supporting for tutoring to running the report to see these kids who are uh, at the borderline of not being at the grade level that they should be, especially when it comes to reading and things like that. So this is all the trainings that we are receiving when we start pulling reports, looking at what their test scores look like, and we have the funding, so we need to use the funding for what the funding is for. So instead of having to where we're holding on to funding and not understanding the purpose of what Title One set aside is for, now we have the full breakdown on where a student shouldn't go without because we have the funding and the state say that we can use this funding for this. So if tutoring is one of the options, we should be trying to connect with schools, school staff, counselors, to find out which students are on the verge of failing so we can go ahead and start giving them that additional services. So that's a lot of the training that we definitely receive is what are we doing? Are we meeting students where they are? Is this the number one thing? Uh, and what additional support are we giving when it comes to our students beyond just school supplies, hygiene, and uniforms? Are we going above that to make sure that their academic success is at the level that it need to be at?
Thank you so much, Brian. I want to pose a question that came in the Q&A box. Um, this is a question about your partnership with the Vision Clinic. And
Mm-hmm.
so the question is, do you have an MOU? And I'll expand this a little and say, or some kind of formal partnership, or how does that work with the clinic?
Yes, so we definitely have an MOU with them uh, that we have to do each year. So we'll do the MOU with them. That's how we became a partner. Then we also worked with our accounts payable where we made them a vendor. So once we did all that, then that's how we were able to partner up with them. But yes, the MOU had to be in place before we can even look at trying to do that.
Another question about Hop Skip Drive and using the Hop Skip Drive as a way to transport students. I really love the work that you've done with getting your pre-K students to school. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. But one of the questions was kind of how that partnership works. And so would love to know, have you worked with your transportation department to arrange that? Or like what kind of agreement or partnership do you have in place with Hop Skip Drive?
So that's also an MOU. So we actually went out for bid for this one. We had several different companies that were wanting to us to partner up with. They kept on reaching out to our office, so we went into a bid with them, and so that was with our transportation department, my office, federal programs, and then of course, we had to get legal involved so we can read all their information on there. So once we found out that they were a good one, we became a partnership with them, and they are in contract with us. So it's a MOU that's in place with them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. At this time, I don't see any other questions that have come in. So I want to just thank you again so much, Brian, for being here and for sharing all of this great information with us. We've got about 5 minutes left in our time together. So I'm going to wrap us up, but I will also share Brian's contact information. I hope that's all right with you, Brian. And if there are more specific questions that you want to reach out to Brian to talk about the great work happening in Oklahoma City, we'll encourage you to do that as well. All right, let's wrap up our time here. We had a little bit of time for questions, and I want to just say that this is part 2 of 4 with our Set Aside series. So if you are not signed up for our next two, I want to just put in a really great plug for these. Our liaison that will be joining us on February 18th has a really powerful story of how she went from having no set aside to building awareness and training her business office to now having about a $50,000 set aside and the things that she's been able to do. So she's got a really great story. I hope you'll join us to hear that. And then March 4th, we have a liaison joining us who is an absolute master at braiding and blending funding. That one is a tongue twister, but she is really great at merging those funding sources and really looking at how her set aside funds can be used and all of the other funding opportunities that are out there. So hope you'll join us for those two if you have not already registered for those. And then just very quickly, if you're not connected with SchoolHouse Connection, we are on all of the social media, so we would love to connect with you. You'll be able to find information about our webinar series, information from our fantastic panelists, and all of the other resources and updates that we have for you through social media. So I want to just encourage you to connect with us there. And then one more plug for our Slack community. This is a great place to bring your questions and thoughts about the Title I set aside and how that can be used if you're not connected with us on Slack. And then also our newsletter, we are trying to send out monthly several of our spotlights to really highlight what our LEAs and our school districts across the country are doing with set aside. We send out many more things besides that, but if you are interested particularly in this topic, this is a great way to stay connected with us and to hear more about those spotlights. Thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your being here. Thank you again to Brian. We are very grateful for all that you're doing and all that you've shared today, and look forward to seeing you all again, hopefully in 2 weeks for the third session of our webinar series. Thanks, everyone, so much. Have a great day.